I would describe myself as someone who's on a mission to help guide us through what I think is this turning point in the age of software. Someone who's like many others, grew up and had to start my career being very passionate about technology. In my case, it was through programming languages and software architecture. And then I realized that we're kind of hitting the limits of what we set out to do when we were creating all these new software development technologies. And I also realized at that point that there's this great inequality happening between these large companies who got so good at building software at scale and creating these billion-line code bases, and the rest of the economy. And for us to really, I think, progress as a society, as the economy, we need to bring those things that have been learned by the tech giants for building software at scale to the rest of the world's organizations. So I'm just trying to catalyze that movement, and both all of my commercial efforts, my startup efforts, and ultimately Project to Product are vehicles for doing that. I basically tried to avoid writing this book. I realized there was something wrong. I always thought that I'd be able to solve it through software, through tools. And at first through open source software, then with TaskTop through commercial software. And I've had, as I worked more and more with these large organizations who really are the ones we really need to see master software at scale, I realized that this couldn't be solved in tools alone. And I also realized, though, that all of these approaches to coaching and all the cultural things, those weren't working as well as they should. And culture was always being blamed, and that never quite sat right with me either. So I realized that there was just a more fundamental disconnect, and that to help bring our customers on that next step of the journey of becoming software innovators, there was nothing more important I could do than to try to bridge that disconnect. And so I decided the only way to do that was to really to understand what it was, and to describe what I saw and what I learned to be the path forward. And really that's what Project to Product is that discovery process, which a lot of it, I learned by working with our customers, by working with a lot of software, by coding a lot prior to starting the journey of the book. But it was fascinating. I learned a lot during the book. I ended up reading probably another 20 books while I was writing the book as well, because I realized I actually just needed much more breadth than what was out there. Not to mention all the customer conversations I had, all the conversations with thought leaders, and so on. So I just realized that even in our commercial efforts at TaskTop and in the tools that we build in my company today, we really need the business and technology leaders to think differently for any of that to really accelerate these transformations. And that as long as the transformations are really started on the wrong foot, started with a cost center or mentality, rather than a value creation mentality, while you might even need to be reducing costs, which is fine as well, then we won't succeed, right? That means as a company, TaskTop can't help our customers succeed. It means people in these organizations who are betting their careers on helping bring their organizations forward can't succeed. So I just realized in all of my conversations with hundreds of enterprise IT organizations, that this was the most important, impactful thing I could do. So I just bit the bullet and did it. So it's also why I had tons of suggestions of ghostwriters and having people help me write it and so on. I realized the only way I could really figure this out in a way that was that I could be sure of was actually to do it myself. So. Yeah, so Gene, I should mention, Gene's been a part of the book journey. I actually initially set out to write a book on integration patterns, something much more tactical and much more in what back then was my comfort zone, which is software architecture and thinking how we apply software architecture to software value streams, right? So to stuff bigger than the code, to all the tickets and issues and planning that goes into, and collaboration that goes into building software.
Yeah.
So, and Gene actually said, no, there's something much bigger here. This is a book that someone with, whether it's someone's a technology leader or an MBA, they need to be able to pick up and to understand the path forward when you actually have this architectural view that spans beyond the source code, and you're starting to think of an organizational architecture, right? And end-to-end value stream architecture. So I think and Gene's been tremendously helpful throughout the book, with my bouncing ideas off him frequently and so on, because he's, I think as a lot of people realize, he's one of these people that has a sharper and more clear vision to the industry than almost anyone. So I think in Gene's mind, I believe that this book manages to push the state of our understanding forward a little bit. And in terms of not just doing the things that we know we need to do, right? The DevOps handbooks Accelerate are an amazing collection of practices, but to reshape the reason that people are not doing them in the business, to reshape the way that business leaders look at IT, and to try to break through this black box that each side feels is on the other side, whether it's the technologist looking at the business or the business looking at technology. So I really think that's it. I think Gene believes that this book is going to help break through that disconnect. And I think, I guess what he's told me in the past as well is just provide that common language, because really that is meant to be one of the contributions of the book, is to provide a common framework and common language for both sides to agree on. And if we can pull that off and make it easy for people to adopt this way of working, I think we will do the thing that Gene wants, that I want, which is to accelerate how quickly traditional businesses, large businesses, entrenched businesses are able to become leading software innovators. So to bring them to that leading edge, rather than always having them trail and worry about who's going to disrupt them next.
Yep. Actually, interestingly enough, the common language came to mind. There's a gentleman who's in charge of, in the Casa Permanente, the Agile Community of Interest. And I sent him a note late last year saying, should we do a book club? And one of my arguments for the book club was that common language, that if we could get people, and he liked the idea, so we'll end up implementing it a little later this year.
That's awesome.
And I suspect your book will be one of them.
That's great. And I think these book clubs they're such, I still run one at TaskTop. They're such an important tool, I think, in terms of people getting, both the background, the passion, the inspiration to find these common grounds, these common languages, and to work together, because it's no longer about mastering any discipline, right? It's no longer about mastering, I don't know, Java refactoring or continuous integration. It's now, the bottlenecks are now in these cross-organizational things. And so it really is all about these common languages. It's such a great question. Laurel, if you could, I think we need a flowframework.org FAQ question on this. I think this is a really good one. So, I think, and let's see if I can answer on the fly now. So I think if you do get inspired by the book, so if you've read it and you feel like your organization should be working more in this way, if you feel like you'd be more in the flow of your own work and you'd be providing more value, if this was the way that your organization was organized, if this was the way that people collaborated and communicated, and I think there's a few different things that I urge you to do. So I think one of the first ones is just to get that. Basically, there's two tacks you can take. One is to try to bottom up get your organization to think and work differently, which it really depends on your organization, how open it is to that. So I'll give a few suggestions on that. The other one is just to do it where you sit. right? Is just to start working the different way and to really start this kind of transformation bottom up. So I'll actually start with the second one. So the book can be applied, and like I think like other works that have really impressed me, such as Dominica de Grande's book, Making Work Visible, it can be applied at different team and organization sizes. And a lot of it will sound like it's really meant to be around the whole enterprise, but you could adopt the flow metrics just on your team, right? You're not going to have an easy time necessarily knowing exactly when the flow time clock starts, because oftentimes work will be handed to you as a tester, as a developer, as an infrastructure person. Weeks down the road, potentially, right? But you can say, look, for us to understand where we're getting blocked, for me to understand my work, I actually need to do what the flow framework says, which is to know when this work first came into our company's value stream, right? What is the initial opening date on that ticket in a system like ServiceNow or a service desk of that sort? And I need to know when the software is deployed, right? So even though you're sitting in your segment of the value stream, you're thinking in terms of basically delivering as much value as you can in this end-to-end way. And that will cause you to, I think, do a different kind of work. For example, it will cause you to see at your team level, at your individual level, if there's these big bottlenecks that are getting in the way of you either taking in the most impactful work or having that work make it to the customer, the internal, the external customer. So I think the key thing is start working with this view of the end-to-end value stream, and keep basically in all your work, all your team's work, keep looking for bottlenecks to the flow of that value stream. For example, if you're waiting on, I know you're a developer and you're constantly waiting on wireframes, you just start adopting this language, which is saying you've got this upstream bottleneck that's impeding your flow. So I think in the end, at the individual level, the whole goal of this book is for every single IT practitioner and specialist to be able to find their own flow, right? To be able to contribute as much as possible to their value stream, and to allow the organization to remove as many of the bottlenecks and impediments and dependencies that stop them from doing that, to get those out of the way. So I think the big thing is, in your daily work, take that end-to-end view, take that end-to-end perspective of the value stream, and keep pushing, because chances are, if you're just wanting to get more done and you're passionate about delivering more to the business, people will listen in terms of what's getting in your way. So that's the kind of, I think, individual level. Then if you're up to it, start showing the bigger path to the organization as a whole, and say, look, there's a few different tacks you can take with this, with project to product. One is to start educating people on why project orientation is not working, right? So you can I think there are many interesting individual stories here. For example, if you as a developer are assigned to 10 different projects, 8 of which are in maintenance mode, 2 of which are active, guess what? You're not able to stay in your flow because your time is getting sliced and diced in unpredictable ways. So really start showing your organization the benefit of product orientation, that this is the only way to do innovation, and that in the end, this is how your team and how your organization should be structured. So I think the way you do that is, again, you can start to do it with your team. And I've seen this in organizations work really well, where a single team will start treating themselves as a product team, even if they're in the bowels of internal IT, right, on some tools team. I've seen this amazing team start treating everything they do as a product, right? And you can set up your work, you can set up your collaborations that way, even if everything around you is managed as projects. So start that, and then I think start communicating, whether it's through a book club, whether it's through showcases of how you now work and why that's better, and how you're able to show the organization, that you've actually got this value metric you created for yourself, even though everyone thought that was never your responsibility to talk in terms of value you deliver to the business. Are you actually adding to the features you create? You're actually adding business value criteria and so on, how you're understanding cost and where your bottlenecks are. So for me, this journey started in terms of this this focus on flow and the roots of the flow framework on work that I did individually as an open source developer, right? I was working exactly this way, and I was removing my own bottlenecks in a much simpler value stream. And that's much more similar to, I think, how a lot of people work in organizations today. So I think apply it to yourself, apply it to your team, and then start using that to show your organization a better path.
I think really that kind of getting to the next step, even like defining it, which your book doesn't try to do. I think you even say it has to be defined, you know, by the organizations and stuff. But getting that first step of what is the business value? The flow metrics to me won't be too hard to do. But getting people to define the business value, that's the more interesting one. So I've got contacts to work on with that, and we'll go from there. And that's what I'm going to focus on, because the business value, so I work in a quality assurance organization within a development organization. And it's getting everybody to agree what's important, the business value that's the biggest gotcha, especially if you're downstream, because you can do all kinds of work and then people will question it because you never agreed on what was delivered, right? So
Absolutely.
they spent a lot of money. What did you give me? Well, it was, you know, pretty much bug-free. Well, that's not a value to them, right? That's an IT value, not a business value. So.
That's right. Exactly. And so, but I think, yeah, you're seeing exactly what the next step is, because by forcing yourself to define business value, you're going to force that discussion. And forcing that discussion means that you get rid of this throw it over the fence mentality, where there's a complete disconnect on what great work is. So, you know, it can sometimes turn into more heated conversations, but those are the right conversations to have and to have that mutual agreement on, even if it's, you know, not kind of end to end in terms of defining value as kind of, you know, the ultimate thing of revenue or customer satisfaction and so on, but just how you're collaborating with a business partner, with a developer, with an infrastructure person. So.
Yep. Agreed.
Number one, that the way that organizations manage projects will continue, do not apply it to innovating on software. It's a flawed model. Even if you're working within a client engagement with an organization, it's going to be slow to transition to a product management model away from a project management model. Start thinking the right way, because it's the one of the main themes of the book is all of the problems this introduces in terms of building great software. It's that management paradigm does not work for building great software. Great software is too complex, too iterative to build. So, you know, number one, move away from that. Number two, stop looking at just the proxy metrics, these segments of the value stream. Stop looking at really user story open to commit as a key metric. It's a relevant metric, but it's a proxy metric. It speaks nothing in terms of what your customer, be they internal or external, sees that value. So look at these value-oriented, result-oriented metrics. And for that, it's really the flow metrics piece. Just understand that flow metrics piece and why thinking end-to-end is important, and why these perils of local optimizations of the value stream are so problematic and have taken so many digital transformations sideways. And then number three, understand, architect, and connect your value stream network, however you do it. Whether, you know, there's many different approaches you can take on this, but unless you've got this end-to-end flow, you won't be able to innovate. You'll always end up with a bottleneck somewhere. You always end up with unreliable and manual processes. And don't just take a look at it in the small, as in, you know, we need to do our deployment automation. Of course you do. You need full automation there. This is about connecting all work intake systems, making sure all work is tracked in some kind of tracking tool, and making sure every single stakeholder in a value stream is connected and can collaborate, even if they're doing that across many systems and tools. So just understand, map out, and connect your value stream architecture. Sorry, connect your value stream network. And you do that through defining your value stream architecture.
Yep.
Yes, for anyone listening to this, I would just also challenge you: be your own value stream architect. Like, take it. This is such a critical role, and in so many organizations, it's not defined. We've got lots of enterprise architects, but no one really owns the value stream, which I think is actually more consequential. The architecture value stream, which is probably more consequential to the organization than some, in many cases, enterprise architectures is today, which are a very well understood problem. So own your own value stream architecture, as much of it as you can. Oh, that's impossible. One other book?
The one, I mean, look, you're probably doing presentations left and right. You get 3 bullets. I'm only giving you 1 bullet. What book should somebody read?
Okay, I'm gonna go with a difficult book. There are many great books, on IT revolution. My bookshelf is huge. This is not an easy book, but if you want to go the level deeper of a lot of the foundations that are there in Project to Product, a lot of what we've learned from manufacturing, it's Product Development Flow by Donald Reinertsen.
I'm sorry, Product Development Flow by who?
Donald Reinertsen. Just look at it's Product Development Flow. You'll see that he's got the interesting name. I hope that what's there in Project to Product gives some of that inspiration to help you and your organization find flow and get on this path to becoming a software innovator. I think we're in a very exciting time where a lot of large organizations now have the opportunity to go through this transition. And I think the faster we do it, the better your career, your organization, and the world will be. So enjoy the journey.